He did not go to the Lockhart party for her. He went because his bookkeeper had missed 6 days of filings, and Casimir Vasari did not believe in coincidence. 2 nights before his engagement was to be announced, the woman who held every number in his empire had gone silent. He walked into that ballroom expecting to find a thief. Instead, he heard a room laughing. What he saw in the seconds that followed did not merely end his engagement. It ended the truce, the alliance, and the man he had been for 12 years. The velvet tray held 7 rings, and Casimir Vasari had been staring at them for 20 minutes without seeing a single one. The jeweler had closed the shop for them. That was the arrangement. The Vasari name did not cue and did not browse. The air smelled of lemon polish and cold metal. It was the smell of money that had never been touched by a human hand. Casimir stood with his coat still on. He did not intend to be here long enough to warrant taking it off. The third one, Renata said. Renata Falco was 30 years old and had never in her life been in a room she did not immediately understand. She wore black in a jeweler's shop, which was either an insult or a strategy. And with Renata it was usually both. The third one is vulgar, Casimir said. The third one is 4 carats, and it will photograph. She said it without heat, the way another woman might read a grocery list. The announcement runs on Sunday. That is what the ring is for, Casimir. It is not jewelry, it is a headline. The jeweler, a slight man named Pharaoh, made a small pained sound, and then pretended he had not. Casimir looked at the third ring. It sat in its velvet slot like a chip of ice. He tried to imagine it on a hand and could not, and it took him a moment to understand why. It was not that he could not imagine it on Renata's hand. It was that he had not once, in the 4 months since the 2 families had shaken on this, tried. Whatever you want, he said. I always do. She turned the glass by its stem and set it down without drinking. You are being difficult tonight. I am being quiet. With you, they are the same thing. She looked at him properly then. My father flies in on Saturday, and he will not tolerate you standing in a corner looking like a man at his own execution. I have no feelings about Saturday. That is precisely the problem. The arrangement was not a marriage. It was a treaty. The Falcos held the trucking lines north out of Brennick. The Viserys held the water. Separately, they had spent 8 years bleeding each other over the same freight. Together they would own the coast, and nobody would ever have to shoot anybody again. And Casimir would sleep at night in a house he did not have to guard. He had signed treaties before. He had never worn one on his hand. Pharaoh bowed and fled toward the back with the tray, and for the first time in an hour, there was silence in the shop. Casimir took out his phone. He did it without thinking about it, which was itself notable, because he was a man who thought about everything. Nothing from the counting house. He scrolled back. Nothing yesterday. Nothing the day before that. He kept going, his thumb moving slowly now, and the ache that had been sitting at the base of his skull all week resolved itself into a single cold point of attention. 6 days. For 6 years, at 8 o'clock in the evening, without exception, on holidays and on the night Casimir's father had died, a message had arrived from the counting house. Never more than 4 lines. The day's intake, the day's outlay, the discrepancies, and the name of any man who had lied to him. It was the only piece of information in his entire life that had never once been wrong. He looked at the empty screen and felt something in his chest turn over like a body in water. Casimir. Renata had stood up. What is it? My bookkeeper has not filed in 6 days, Renata laughed. It was a short, elegant, entirely humorless sound. Your bookkeeper, she repeated. Yes. Then send someone. We are 2 days out from an announcement that will reorganize this city, and you are standing in a jeweler's shop with a face like a funeral because a woman has not sent you her homework. He turned his head and looked at her. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to, and the men who had learned that about him too late were all in the same place now, and it was cold there, and it was underwater. She is not a woman who has not sent me her homework," he said. Renata's smile faded a degree. "She has the keys," Casimir said. "Not copies. The keys. She holds the offshore structure, the routing, the names of every police captain on my payroll, and the amount each one takes. She holds the paper that could put me in a room with a federal prosecutor for the rest of my life. If she has gone quiet, then one of two things is true." He put the phone back in his coat. "She is selling me," he said, "or she is already dead." Her name was Maren Ostro, and in 6 years, Casimir had never once had to ask her for anything twice. She had come to him sideways, and by accident. There had been a problem with the books at the fish market on Talbot Street, and he had found a woman of about 25 at a folding desk in a freezing warehouse, in a gray wool coat, working through a dead man's accounting with a pencil. She had not looked up. She had said, without any particular emphasis, that the owner had been stealing from him for 4 years, that the theft was hidden in the ice deliveries, that it came to about $60,000, and that if Casimir was planning to kill him in the building, she would appreciate it if he waited until she had finished, because she had brought her own lunch and she was not going to be able to eat it afterward. He had hired her before she finished the sentence. That was the story his men told, and it was true. And it was also entirely beside the point, because the thing that made Maren Ostro remarkable was not any of it. It was that nothing had ever happened to her since. She did not rise. She did not overreach. She did not appear at the parties or the funerals or the long, violent dinners where the shape of the city got decided over veal and grappa. She occupied a narrow office above the counting house on Ardley Row. She wore the same gray wool coat she had been wearing the day he found her, and she sat with her hands folded and perfectly still, while men screamed at each other around her and waited for them to finish, and told them the number. Her hands never moved. In his world, a man's hands told you everything, and a woman whose hands did not move was either a saint or the most dangerous person in the building, and Casimir had been careful, privately, never to decide which. 2 winters ago, a Falco man had come into the counting house with a knife and told her to open the floor safe. She had told him the safe was on a timer and would not open for 14 minutes, that he was welcome to wait, that there was tea in the cupboard behind him, and that if he intended to cut her, he should do it now rather than later, because she had work to finish and would rather not bleed on the ledgers. And 12 minutes into the 14, Emmerich had come up the stairs, and the Falco man had died on the landing, without ever understanding that Maren had triggered the alarm with her foot before he finished saying the word open. She had not mentioned it. Casimir found out from Emmerich 4 days later, by accident. When he asked her why, she said that nothing had happened and that she had ordered a new rug because the old one had a stain on it, and that it would appear as a $42 expense in the March filing. And did he have any objection? "You have gone somewhere," Renata said. They were on the pavement now. Emmerich was already moving toward the black car at the curb. The night air was cold and smelled of rain that had not started yet. "Give it to a lieutenant," Renata said, pulling her collar up. "Have one of them break down her door and drag her back by the hair, and then come to my father's table on Saturday and smile." "No, Casimir." She stopped walking. "It is a bookkeeper. It is the help." He turned around. "Say that again," Casimir said. Renata Falco was not a coward. She had buried more people than most soldiers, and she did not flinch. But she was not stupid either, and she looked at his face, and something behind her eyes recalculated. "I only meant," she said, "that you have people." "I have people," Casimir agreed, "and every one of them can be bought. I know this because I have bought most of them from somebody else." He put his hand on the frame of the open car door and stopped. "In 6 years that woman has never asked me for a raise. She has never asked me for a favor or a car or a name or a night off. She has never asked me for anything at all. Do you understand how rare that is? In my business, it means she wants something bigger." "That," said Casimir, "is exactly what I have been afraid of." He got into the car. Emmerich dropped into the driver's seat and looked at him in the mirror. Ardley Row? She has not been there in 6 days. Casimir stared out at the amber shopfront, at Renata standing under it with her arms folded, watching the car and not moving. Where does she go? She has to go somewhere. Everybody goes somewhere. Emeric hesitated. It was the hesitation that did it. He had never seen this man hesitate before a direct question. Emeric. There is a party tonight, boss. Emeric's eyes did not leave the mirror. At the Lockhart house, on the hill, it is an engagement. The Croft boy and the Lockhart girl. I know about the party. It is a truce night. I am not going to a truce night. Yeah. Emeric was quiet for a second. It is just that the catering account for that party runs through a shell we own. And somebody pulled the staffing list yesterday. And the name that pulled it was hers. The rain started then, all at once, the first fat drops bursting against the windscreen and running down it in long, crooked lines. Doc Stachamir sat back against the leather. Drive, he said. The Lockhart house sat on the hill above Brennick, like something dropped there by a larger and less careful civilization. From the road below it showed as a long band of gold light strung across the black shoulder of the hill. Ambrose Lockhart owned 12 container ships and a great many politicians and had never once in his life been told no. She pulled the staffing list, Casimir said, for a party at the Lockhart house. Yesterday afternoon, Emeric took the turn at the bottom of the hill, and the car began to climb. Petar flagged it as unusual and then did nothing about it, because it was her, and nothing she does is unusual. She has never been wrong about anything in 6 years, boss. Nobody checks her. That is not a criticism. That is just what happens to a person who is never wrong. The Lockharts were not his enemies. That was the difficulty. Every man in Brennick who moved things illegally moved them inside Lockhart Steel and paid Lockhart rates for the privilege. Ambrose did not need to kill you. He simply needed to stop taking your calls, and then, over the following year, you starved, which was why the truce nights were real, and why breaking one was not a crime but a category error, like setting fire to the ocean. And Maren Ostro had pulled the staffing list. If she had gone to the Lockharts, she had gone with the only thing she had to sell, which was him. Every number, every route, every name, except that she had not covered it. She had pulled the list through his own shell company, on his own account, with her own name on the request, in a system she herself had built and could have walked through like a ghost. Maren Ostro, who had once restructured his entire offshore chain in a weekend and left no fingerprint anywhere at all, had signed her name to the one document that would tell him exactly where she was. That was not betrayal. Betrayal is quiet. That was a woman leaving a trail. Casimir shut his eyes and thought about the last time he had seen her, a Thursday, 10 days ago, in the narrow room above the counting house. She had stood to hand him a set of transfers, and she had put her weight on the desk, just the flat of one hand pressed down on the wood while she straightened, so smoothly that he had almost not seen it. He had seen it. He had noticed that she was thinner than in the autumn, that her wrist, where it came out of the sleeve of the gray coat, looked like something you could snap with 2 fingers, that her free hand had gone to her side and stayed there. And he had said, "Are you unwell?" And she had said, "I am tired. There is a great deal of work." And he had laughed. He had actually laughed, standing there in his good coat, with the transfers in his hand, and she had smiled the small dry smile she kept, for exactly that purpose. Casimir opened his eyes. The rain came sideways across the windscreen, and the wipers dragged it away. He was aware of a sensation in his chest he had not felt in a great many years. It took him most of the climb to identify it, and when he did, he found he did not much care for it. It was shame. He set it down carefully, the way you set down something that will be useful later, and picked up the other thing instead, the cold thing, the thing he was good at, because if she had sold him, he would have to kill her. There was no version of the night in which that was not true, and he would have to do it himself, because he did not send men to close his own accounts. He tried to imagine it, and discovered with a kind of clinical alarm that he could not. He had killed a great many men and could remember every one of their faces, and he could not construct a picture of Marin Ostro sitting still with her hands folded, looking at him, while he did it. Which was the answer to a question he had been very carefully not asking himself for about 4 years. "Boss," Emerick said quietly, "we are here." The car came up over the last rise, and the house opened out in front of them, blazing, absurd, its windows pouring gold light across a lawn of wet black grass. Valets running in the rain with their jackets over their heads. Emerick, yeah. "If she has sold me," Casimir said, "do not follow me into that room." He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The smell hit him first. Lilies, warm wax, the sugar of 100 glasses of something sweet. Underneath it, so faint that only a man who had grown up in the back of restaurants would have caught it. The thin, sour tang of a kitchen working at capacity behind a closed door. It was the smell of a house where nothing had ever gone wrong. Casimir handed his wet coat to a boy at the door and walked into the ballroom, and every conversation within 20 feet of him stopped. And then, very deliberately, started again. He counted the room the way he always counted a room. 4 exits. Ambrose Lockhart, at the far end under the great gilt mirror, holding court. 6 of his own men in the crowd, none of them looking at him, all of them aware of him, the way a body is aware of a hand. And along the walls, in black and white, moving in slow, steady loops with trays held at shoulder height, the staff, 20 of them, perhaps more. Nobody in that room had looked at a single one of them all evening. Casimir began to walk. He took a glass from a passing tray and did not drink from it, and his eyes went over the staff one at a time, and he had reached the 12th when he heard the laughter. It was not the laughter of a joke. It was a specific quality of laughter Casimir had been hearing all his life and could identify instantly, the way a soldier identifies the sound of a rifle being made ready. It meant a group of people had found something to be superior about and were enjoying it together. He turned his head. There was a knot of maybe 15 guests in a loose half-circle. In the middle of them, with his back to Casimir, was a man in a very good dinner jacket, holding a glass, performing. Beside him stood a young woman with copper hair and a diamond on her left hand the size of a molar, laughing behind her fingers in the way women laugh when they want to be seen, to be too kind to laugh. And in front of them, holding a silver tray of empty glasses, stood Marin Ostro. Casimir stopped walking. She was wearing the uniform, black skirt, white shirt, hair pulled back, a small white apron. She was standing very straight. The tray was steady in her hands. She was looking at a point just past the man's left shoulder, at nothing at all, with an expression of perfect and total neutrality. And she was letting him talk. 6 years. The man was saying. 6 years. I hear nothing. And I think to myself, well, she has gone off and done something remarkable, because that is what she was always going to do. Cleverest person in any room. My father used to say. He turned to the crowd, opening his hands, bringing them in. "And here she is," he said, "running a tray." They laughed. Marin did not move. Casimir felt something happen at the back of his skull, a small, cold click, like a bolt going home. "And so?" the copper-haired woman said, delighted, appalled, and delighted. "And so?" "Stop it." "No, no, this is a happy thing." Ansel Croft turned back and looked directly at Marin and smiled at her with what a person from a distance might genuinely have mistaken for warmth. "Marin and I were together for 2 years. She used to plan our whole future out on a piece of paper, the little house, and the numbers, and how much we would need. You costed the entire thing." He shook his head fondly. "You were always costing things." He put his hand on the copper-haired woman's waist. "Darling," he said, "this is Marin. Marin, this is Verity Lockhart, my fiancée." There was a beat. It went on slightly too long, and everyone in that half-circle felt it, and it was in that silence that the thing turned from a joke into something else. and every one of them stayed to watch, anyway. "Congratulations," Marin said. Her voice was completely level. She did not put the tray down. She did not shift her feet. "Thank you," Verity Lockhart said, and had the grace, for about half a second, to look uncomfortable, and then did not, because her fiancé was looking at her and she wanted to be on the right side of the joke. "You know what the funny thing is," Ansel said. "She used to lecture me constantly about ambition, about not settling. Do you know what she said to me the last night when I told her I was going to work for Verity's father? She said, and I remember this word for word, she said, 'Do not take money you have not earned, because you will spend the rest of your life pretending you did.'" He laughed. He looked around to make sure they were laughing with him. "And now," he said, "she is carrying my glasses." Casimir crossed the room. He did not run. He would think about that afterward, in the small hours, the fact that he had not run. He walked, and the crowd opened the way crowds had been opening for him since he was 23, and he came up on the outside of that half circle and stopped. And nobody there knew who he was except two men, and both of them went the color of milk. Ansel Croft, still half turned to his audience, registered that something had changed in the temperature of the group, and Marin looked at Casimir. It was the first time she had moved in 3 minutes. Her eyes went wide, just slightly, just for an instant, and Casimir saw something cross her face that he had never seen there in 6 years. It was not shame, it was not relief, it was fear, and it was not fear of the man beside her. It was fear of him, of being seen by him here, in this uniform holding this tray. "Please," her face said, "please do not." And then, with a discipline he would think about for the rest of his life, she smoothed it away and looked at the middle distance again. Her hands on the silver tray had not moved at all. Casimir looked at her hands. He looked at the wrist and the bone standing up in it, and the way the shirt hung off her. He looked at the flat, absolute stillness of a woman being taken apart in public by a man she had once made plans on paper with, and taking it, and holding the tray steady. And Casimir, who had not been surprised by anything in a very long time, understood 2 things at once. The first was that she was not here to sell him. The second was that she was here for the money. Somebody behind the doors of this house was paying her by the hour. And a woman who could have walked into his office on any day of 6 years and named a figure had instead put on a uniform and come up this hill and let this happen, rather than ask. "Anyway," Ansel Croft said into the silence, uncertain now, still trying to steer it, "it is nice to see you, Marin, really." He lifted his empty glass and held it out toward her tray, without looking at her. Marin reached for it, and Casimir stepped forward and closed his hand around the glass first. He simply held it, with the other man's fingers still on it, and looked at him. "You are holding my glass," Ansel said. "Yes." There was a long moment in which Ansel Croft, who was 31 years old and had never been hit in his life, tried to work out what was happening. "I am sorry," he said. "Do we know each other?" Casimir took the glass, prying it out from between the man's fingers, without any force at all, and set it down on the silver tray in Marin's hands. And the small, clean sound of the glass touching the metal was the only sound in that corner of the room. Then he took the tray out of her hands. "I do not need you to do this," Marin said, very quietly, only to him. "I know, Casimir." Her voice cracked on it, once for the first time in 6 years. He handed the tray to a boy in a white jacket, standing frozen 2 feet away. And the boy took it because he did not know what else to do, and then Casimir turned back. The whole room was watching now. 200 people, and the music had stopped somewhere in there without anybody noticing, and Ambrose Lockhart had lowered his glass at the far end and was standing very still. Casimir looked at Marin Ostro. She was white, standing in the middle of the worst night of her life, with her chin up, and her hands empty and nothing to hold, and he saw exactly what would happen if he simply walked her out of that room. Every person here would know that Vasari had collected his bookkeeper from the floor. She would be a woman who had been rescued. She would be the help who got taken home. There was only one thing he could do that would make it impossible for anyone in Brennick to ever tell the story that way. And it would cost him the Falco Treaty, the truce, and 12 years of careful, bloodless work, and he would be at war by Sunday. "Forgive me," Casimir said. Then he put his hand along her jaw, and he kissed her. He did it slowly, which was somehow worse for everyone watching. He did not sweep her back or crush her against him or perform any of the things the room might have laughed at afterward. He cupped her face in one hand, as if it were something he had carried a long way, and was setting down at last, and he kissed her mouth, and held it, and the whole gold ballroom went absolutely and completely silent. Marin did not melt. She went rigid, every muscle in her body locked, and her hands hung at her sides, and for 3 full seconds, she stood there like a woman being held at gunpoint. And then, at the edge of the 4th second, something in her broke, and her hand came up, and she took a fistful of his shirt. She did not pull him closer, she just held on. And Casimir Vasari, who had crossed that floor with an argument assembled and a cost calculated, felt her fingers close in the fabric over his heart, and felt the tremor go through her that she had not permitted herself in front of any of them, and he understood, with a slow and terrible clarity, that at some point in the last 4 seconds, he had stopped doing this. For the room, he broke it, he stepped back. Marin stared at him. There were 2 spots of color high on her cheekbones, and her eyes were enormous, and utterly, utterly lost. Casimir turned around. He looked at Ansel Croft, and at Verity Lockhart, and at the 15 people who had been laughing, and then, unhurried, at the 200 behind them, and he spoke into that silence in a voice that did not need to be raised. "This is Marin Ostro," he said. "She has kept my books for 6 years. She is not staff, she is not help, and she is not anybody's story. She is the only person in this city. I have never once had to check. Anyone who has anything further to say about her may say it to me, and I will be in Brennick all week." He put his hand out. Marin did not take it. She was looking at him as though he had shot her. He took her by the wrist, and she let him, and he walked her out of the Lockhart house, through 200 people who did not make a sound. They were down the front steps and into the rain before she spoke. "Do you have any idea," Marin said, "what you have just done to me?" Merrick had the car door open before they had crossed half the drive. Marin pulled her wrist out of his hand. "Get in," Casimir said. "No, Marin. Do you understand what you have just done?" She was standing in the rain in a white shirt, with no coat, and she was shaking, and it was not from the cold, and it was not from fear, and Casimir realized with a jolt that in 6 years he had never once seen this woman angry. There were 200 people in that room, every family on this coast, and you stood in the middle of them and told them that I mattered to you. You do matter to me, I know that. Her voice broke, and she pulled it back together, with an effort he could see. I have known that for 4 years, and the entire point of the last 6 years was that nobody else ever did. I am the woman nobody looks at. That is not an accident. That is not a sad little fact about my life. That is a security measure, and you just took it away from me, in front of everybody. And now every man in this city who wants a piece of you knows exactly where to put the knife." She was crying, and did not seem to have noticed. "They will not come near you," Casimir said. "They will come for me, first." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, furious with herself. "You have spent 12 years making sure nobody can find the seam in you. And tonight you walked into a party and showed them exactly where it is." Casimir stood in the rain and looked at her. "Then why," he said, "did you put your name on the staffing list?" She stalked. The rain ran down her face, and she stood absolutely still with her chin up. And Casimir watched a very fast and very sophisticated calculation happen behind her eyes, and watched her decide. Because I needed you to find me, Marin said, and I could not tell you why. Then she said, my coat. Get in the car. Casimir, my coat is in the cloakroom of that house, the gray one. I need it. I will buy you 100 coats. There is an envelope in the lining, she said. Emeric was gone before Casimir finished turning his head. They put her in the back seat, and she sat with her hands folded in her lap, wet through, staring at nothing. And it was 4 long minutes before Emeric came back down the steps at a flat run with the gray wool coat bundled under his arm like a stolen child, and put the car down the hill so fast the tires broke loose twice on the wet turns. Marin took the coat. She opened the lining along a seam that had been unpicked and re-sewn with black thread in stitches so small and so even that Casimir understood immediately. She had done it herself, at night, by hand, and more than once. She took out a brown envelope and held it in both hands in her lap. Lorimer Voss, she said, has been selling you for 14 months. Casimir Vasari sat in the dark and did not move. Say that again, he said. You heard me. Lorimer Voss put me through school. His voice was extremely quiet. Lorimer Voss carried my father's coffin. Lorimer Voss sat in a hospital corridor for 2 days when I was 20 years old and did not sleep and did not eat and did not let anybody in that room but me. I know, Marin said. I checked it 4 times before I believed it. I have never in my life wanted so badly to be wrong. She turned the envelope over in her hands. It did not begin with money. That is the part I got wrong for months. That is why it took so long, because I kept looking for a payment, and there was no payment. Lorimer is 68, Casimir. He does not want money. He wants the last 10 years of his life to be the 10 years where he was right. She said it without any cruelty at all, and that was, somehow worse, he never wanted the treaty. He said so, for 2 years in every room, and you overruled him every time. And eventually, he stopped saying it. Do you remember when he stopped saying it? Casimir remembered exactly when he had stopped saying it. He stopped saying it, Marin said, because he had found another way to be right. She pulled the sheet halfway out of the envelope and pushed it back in, as if she could not bear to let it into the air. Saturday night. Your engagement announcement. At some point in the evening, you will be asked to step into a private room to sign the freight accords, because that is the only reason any of them are actually there, and I will not come out of the room. No. And Lorimer holds the family until the dust settles, and then hands it to the Falcos intact. And in a year he retires as the man who saved the Vasari name from a war that a hot-headed young man was about to start. Marin looked at her hands. He will believe that, by the way. That is the thing about him. He is not lying to anyone. He has simply arranged the world so that being right and killing you are the same act. The envelope, Casimir said. The envelope is Ansel. Casimir turned his head. Lorimer would never move money to the Falcos directly, and he would never put anything in writing. So it had to be laundered through something legitimate, something enormous and dull, with so much paper going through it every day that a few extra sheets would drown. It had to go through the Lockharts. She finally looked at him. Ansel Croft works in Ambrose Lockhart's freight documentation office. He signs bills of lading. He has done it since the week he left me. He is not important, and he is not clever, and he never will be in that family, and that is precisely why they used him. Somebody needed a man with a signature and no standing, who would do what he was told and never once ask what he was carrying. And you knew where he worked. I knew where he worked, Marin said, because I have known him since I was 22 years old. 14 months ago, she said. I found a route that did not make sense. That is all it was. A container of nothing going somewhere for no reason at a cost that was wrong by about 11%. 11%, Casimir. If it had been 50, I would have known instantly, and if it had been 1, I would never have seen it. But 11 is the number a man picks when he is trying to look like a rounding error. She almost smiled. I have spent 14 months following an 11% lie back to its source, and its source is a man who used to hold my hand at the cinema. And tonight I stood in front of him with a tray in my hands and let him take me apart in front of a room full of strangers, because if I had said one word back to him, he would have remembered that I am not stupid, and he would have wondered why I was there. Casimir looked at the envelope in her lap. Then what is in it? 9 bills of lading, Marin said, with his signature on all of them. Taken out of a locked drawer in the study on the second floor of that house, 3 nights ago. She held it out to him. You do not have to believe me, she said. You never have to believe me. That is the whole point of me. He did not take it. Marin, he said, you cannot straighten up. You have not been to a doctor? You are the thinnest I have ever seen a living person, and you were carrying a tray for $11 an hour in a house full of people who want me dead. He turned in the seat and faced her fully. I pay you, he said, $240,000 a year. Marin Ostro looked straight ahead at the back of Imeric's seat. Where is it? Casimir said. Where is the money? She did not answer him. She sat with the envelope in her lap and her face turned to the window, and the streetlights went over her, one after another, and Casimir understood that he had struck something, and that it had not been the thing he was aiming at. He was about to ask again when his phone rang. Renata. He almost did not answer. Afterward, he would spend a long time being grateful that he had. 7 minutes, Renata Falco said. Her voice was pleasant and dry, and completely under control. That is how long it took for someone to call me. 7 minutes. A friend of my mother's, if you can believe it, weeping with joy. She wanted to be the first. Renata. 200 people, Casimir. A short breath. You could not have come to my father's house and said the words like a man. You had to do it in the middle of Ambrose Lockhart's ballroom, with your mouth on the help. Do not, Casimir said, call her that again. There was a pause on the line, and then Renata Falco laughed, and it was the first honest sound he had ever heard her make, and it was awful. Oh, she said softly. Oh, you poor man. You think you found her tonight. The car went very quiet. Casimir, Renata said, Lorimer told me on Monday that you would go. Casimir did not move. Beside him, Marin had turned from the window and was watching his face, and whatever she saw there made her go absolutely still. He said, the girl has surfaced, and he will go to her, and when he does, he will do something stupid in public because he has been waiting 6 years for an excuse. Renata's voice had not risen at all. And I said, Casimir Vasari has never done a stupid thing in his life. And Lorimer said he has never had a reason. And then he told me not to be in that room tonight. A pause. And I was not in that room tonight, Casimir. Did you notice that I was not there? Casimir closed his eyes. The party had not been where he found her. The party was where they had put her. He knew she pulled the staffing list, Casimir said. He built the staffing list, Renata said. Ask yourself who told the catering shell you own that it was short 4 bodies. So there it is, Renata said. You have humiliated me in front of every family on this coast, and I find I am not even angry. I am something much worse than angry. I am embarrassed. A rustle, the sound of a woman standing up. Saturday is off. And in a fortnight someone will try to kill you, and I will not be able to say with any confidence that it was not us. Renata, what? Casimir looked at the woman sitting beside him in a wet, white shirt, holding an envelope. Thank you, he said, for telling me. Silence on the line. I did not do it for you, Renata Falco said. I did it because I have spent 4 months being handled by an old man who thought I was furniture. And I am not furniture. A short, cold breath. Do not send back the ring. Sell it and give the money to the woman who was carrying your glasses, because she is worth 10 of me, and we both know it. And it is going to take you about a week to understand exactly how badly you have wronged her. The line went dead. Casimir lowered the phone. Then he pressed the sides of it until the screen fractured with a small dry crack, and he lowered the window and dropped it into the flooded gutter as the car went past. Nobody in the car said anything for a long time. Emmerich, take us home, not the Ardley house. The other one, boss. And Emmerich, nobody knows where we are. Not the crews, not the captains, not the counting house. He watched the black streets slide past. And not Lorimer Voss. Emmerich's hands tightened on the wheel until the leather made a small sound. He did not ask. Marin was still watching him. You did that too fast, she said quietly. I have known him 30 years. That is my point. She turned the envelope over in her hands. You did not argue. You did not defend him. You did not tell me I was wrong. Her voice was very careful now. How long have you known? Gotch Casimir looked out at the rain. I have not known anything, he said. For about a year, I have been unable to sleep, and I have not been able to tell you why. And once or twice, I have found myself standing in a room and counting the exits, and one of the men in the room was Lorimer. He rubbed his eyes. I have simply been afraid, and I have spent a year telling myself that a man who is afraid of his own family is not a man. He is a coward, and so I have not looked. Casimir, and you looked, he said alone, without asking me for a single thing. He turned and looked at her. Why? And Marinostro, for the first time in 6 years, could not meet his eyes. The house on Vance Hill was small and gray and ugly. Doc Smear had bought it 8 years ago through 4 separate entities and had never once slept in it. 2 entrances, a wall, no neighbors, half a mile of open road in either direction. He carried her up the front steps because she could not do them. She had made it 4 paces up the path and then stopped and gone down onto one knee in the wet grass. Back straight, head up, still holding the envelope, saying nothing. He picked her up. She weighed almost nothing. She did not fight him, which frightened him more than anything else that had happened that night. And she pressed her face into his shoulder and said, in a small, flat voice, I am not going to apologize for this. I did not ask you to. I am extremely good at my job. I know. Do not, Marin said. Tell Emmerich. Dr. Pell arrived 40 minutes later, with rain on his glasses, and the particular silence of a man who had been woken up and decided not to make a thing of it. He had been the Vasari physician for 22 years. Casimir stood in the doorway of the back bedroom, with his arms folded, and did not leave. Out, said Dr. Pell. No. Pell looked at him for a moment over the top of his glasses, and then, evidently deciding that this was not the hill, turned back to the woman sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. Casimir made himself watch all of it. He watched Pell press 2 fingers very gently against her left side, and watched Marin go rigid and her breath stop, and watched her say, in a perfectly conversational tone, that it was nothing that she had walked into a doorframe. You did not walk into a doorframe, Pell said. You went down a staircase. And you went down it because you stood up, and there was nothing in you to stand up on. Marin looked at the floor. Pell straightened up and did not look at Casimir at all, which was a professional courtesy that Casimir understood and did not deserve. 2 of her ribs are cracked, the 7th and the 8th on the left side. 3 or 4 days old, healing badly because she has not rested them, because she has spent every night since carrying a loaded tray at shoulder height. He snapped his bag shut. And I am going to be precise about the cause, Casimir, because she will not be. She did not fall because she was clumsy. She fainted. Her blood pressure is low enough that I would like an explanation for how she is upright in this room. She has not eaten a proper meal in months, and she is exhausted in a way I do not have a good word for. It is not tiredness, it is what happens to a person who has been running on fear for over a year. Casimir did not say anything. She will be fine if she stops, Pell said more gently. That is the whole prescription. She stops. I do not stop, Marin said. I am aware. Pell went down the stairs. Casimir followed, and at the front door, The old man turned around and said the only unprofessional thing he had ever said in 22 years. When did you last look at her? Casimir did not answer. That is all, Dr. Pell said, and went out into the rain. Casimir stood in the hallway a long time. He remembered what he had done on that Thursday, with a clarity that was almost obscene. He had gone to a restaurant on the water. He had eaten sea bass and drunk most of a bottle of something expensive, and he had argued cheerfully with Renata's father about the seating for an announcement designed to end with Casimir, face down in a private room. And he had walked out onto the terrace and thought with real satisfaction. And 2 miles away in a rented room he had never seen, a woman with 2 cracked ribs had been sitting up at a desk with a pencil, going through his numbers, alone, hunting the man who was going to kill him. Casimir went back up the stairs. She was asleep, sitting up, still fully dressed, her back against the headboard, her hands folded in her lap. The brown envelope was under her right hand. Even unconscious, she had not let go of it. He stood at the end of the bed and looked at her hands. Then he went down to the kitchen and called Emeric. Find out where she lives. Boss, I already know where she lives. There was a pause. Say that again, Casimir said. 20 Corley Street, above the laundrette. Emeric's voice had gone strange. I drove her home once, 2 winters ago, the night of the thing, with the knife. She did not want me to, and I did it anyway. You have known for 2 years. She asked me not to tell you. A long silence on the line. Boss, I did not know it meant anything. She said it was temporary. Casimir looked out of the kitchen window into the black wet garden. Go and see it, he said. Now. And do what? Nothing. Look at it. And then come here and tell me exactly what you saw, and do not soften it, Emeric. Because if you soften it, I will find out, and I will never forgive you. Emeric came back at 3 in the morning. Casimir heard the footsteps come down the hall and stop in the doorway, and did not turn around, because he had been standing at the window with his hands flat on the sill for 2 hours. Well, he said. Emeric did not answer. Dojny Casimir turned around. Emeric was standing in the doorway, with his hat in his hands, which was not a thing Casimir had ever seen him do. He was a man who had put 4 bodies in the river without changing his expression, and he could not say it. Emeric, boss. I do not want to, I know. Say it anyway. Emeric turned his hat over once in his hands. There was no bed, he said. The kitchen was very quiet. There is a chair, Emeric said, by the window, with a blanket folded on the arm of it, folded properly like a hotel. And the blanket is worn through in one place, at the shoulder, where a person's shoulder would go. He was still looking at the floor. And there is a desk, a good desk. It is the only good thing in the room. And there is a wall behind it, boss, and it is covered, from the skirting board to the ceiling. Roots and dates and names. 14 months of it. She has drawn the whole thing on the wall of a rented room because she did not have anywhere else to put it. He stopped. Is that all? Casimir said. No. Emeric looked up. His eyes were red. There is a photograph on the desk. Of you. He put his hat back on. It is from the newspaper. 4 years ago. The thing at the harbor with the mayor. She cut it out and kept it on the desk and looked at it every night while she worked. And I stood in that room, boss, and I looked at the chair she has been sleeping in for a year. And I want you to know that I am not going to talk about this to anybody, ever, and I would like to go home now. He heard her on the stairs at 4:10 in the morning. He had not slept. He had been sitting in the front room with a bottle he had not opened and the lights off, running the last 14 months of his own life through his hands, like a rosary, and finding a bead missing in every decade. The sound was very quiet. A person coming down a staircase, 1 step at a time, in stockinged feet. Stopping every 3 or 4 steps to breathe, Casimir got up and went out into the hall and turned on the light. She was 2/3 of the way down, the gray coat on over the ruined white shirt, the envelope in her left hand and her right hand flat against the wall, white to the lips. She had made it 7 steps. No, Casimir said. There is a courier, Marin said. Go back to bed. There is a courier who leaves the Lockhart freight office at 6 o'clock every Friday morning with the week's manifests, and takes them to a bonded warehouse on Harrow Street, and the originals are destroyed. She took another step down. It is Friday. If those originals go into the shredder, then the sheets in this envelope are the only proof left in the world, and they came out of a locked drawer in a house I stole a uniform to get into, and any lawyer breathing could put them on a fire in 10 minutes by explaining how I got them. Marin, so I need the copies. The copies are Lockhart's own, made by Lockhart's own clerk, and they will sit in that warehouse for 7 years, because that is the law, and if I can get the index number before 6 o'clock, then I can find them any time I want for the rest of my life. And then it does not matter what happens to me. Do you understand? It does not matter what happens to me. Stop talking, Casimir said, and stop walking. She kept walking. He went up the stairs and caught her by the arms as her knee went, and she made a small, furious sound, and he lifted her clean off the staircase, and she hit him. It was not much of a blow. She was too weak and too close, and it did nothing at all. And Casimir stood on the stairs of an empty house holding a woman who was hitting him and did not move. Put me down. No. So. Casimir, put me down. I am not finished. I am not finished. You are finished. You do not get to decide that. It came out of her raw and torn, in a voice he had never heard, and it stopped him more completely than anything else could have. You do not get to walk into a room after 6 years and decide when I am finished. That was mine. That was the one thing that was mine. He set her down on the stair. She sat, hard, and put her hands over her face, and Casimir Vasari sat down on the step below her, and did not touch her, and for about a minute, the only sound in the house was the two of them breathing. Please, Marin said. Casimir went very still. She had never said it, not once, not in 6 years. Not when he was wrong, not when he was cruel, not when he had shouted at her in the first year, before he understood what she was. She had corrected him and informed him, and told him the number, and never once asked him for anything. He turned around and looked up at her. Please let me finish it, she said. Her hands came down. Her face was wet and completely open, and it was like looking into a house with the roof off. Because if you take it away from me now, if you carry me upstairs and put me to bed and go out and do it yourself and come back and tell me it is done, then it was all for nothing. Do you see? Then I am just a woman who got hurt. Then I am the girl with the tray. Casimir looked at her for a long moment. 4 hours, he said. She blinked. You will sit. You will eat what I put in front of you, all of it, and you will not tell me you are not hungry, because I do not care. And at 8 o'clock, Dr. Pell will come back, and you will let him strap your ribs and put a line in your arm, and you will not argue, because you have already used your one argument tonight. And you used it well, and the index number? Emmerich is already outside that warehouse, Casimir said. He went straight there from this kitchen. He has a man inside the Lockhart clerk's office who has been on my payroll for 6 years, and he will have the batch number by 5:30, and it will be on this table in front of you before the shredder is switched on. Marin stared at him. You did that before, I asked. Yes. Why did you not tell me? Because you were asleep, Casimir said. For the first time in 14 months, and I would have burned the warehouse down before I woke you up. Marin Ostro put her forehead down on her knees. Her shoulders shook. She did not make a sound. He let her, and did not touch her, because he had been raised by violent men and had learned exactly one useful thing from all of them, which is that there is a kind of pain you must not interrupt. After a while, she lifted her head. Then I want a drink, and I want to show you the 11%, she said hoarsely, because you are going to go and see him, and if you go into that room without knowing the shape of it, Casimir, he will talk you out of it. He has talked you out of everything for 30 years, and he is better at it than any man alive. They worked until the sky went gray. He put food in front of her, and she ate it, slowly, mechanically, without appearing to taste it. He poured her 2 fingers of whiskey, and she drank it in one motion, like a woman taking medicine, coughed, and set the glass down without comment, and the shaking in her hands eased. She spread the 9 bills of lading across the table and talked, and Casimir sat beside her and watched. A woman assemble the murder of a man he loved out of paper. Her hands moved. He noticed it at about 5:30, and he almost said something, and did not. For 6 years those hands had been folded, and still on every desk, in every room. And now they were moving across the paper, quick and certain tracing routes, tapping a column twice when she wanted him to look at it. And Casimir understood that he had been wrong about her stillness. It had not been calm. It had been the enormous, permanent, unbroken effort of a woman holding herself rigid, so that nobody would ever see her shake. At 6 o'clock, the phone buzzed. Emmerich. Marin read the batch number aloud twice, wrote it down, folded the paper into the envelope and sat back, and let out a breath that she had been holding. Casimir thought for about 14 months. "It is done," she said. "It is not done." "No," she looked up at him. "No, it is not." Casimir came back from the hall with a small, flat pistol, and put it on the table beside her plate, and Marin looked at it the way a person looks at an animal in the road. "I do not know how to use that," she said. "There is nothing to know." You pointed at the door. He put on his coat. "Emmerich will be on the gate. Pell comes at 8. Nobody else. If a man comes through that door, who is not one of those 3, you use both hands, and you keep pulling until it stops making noise." Marin stood up too fast, and went gray, and had to catch the edge of the table. And Casimir took a step toward her, and she put a hand out to stop him. "Casimir." He waited. She was looking at the coat, and the shape of the thing under his arm, and her jaw was working. "He held your hand in that hospital corridor," she said, "for 2 days when you were 20. Yes, I do not want you to do this. I know. I have spent 14 months building the thing that is going to make you do this," Marin said, "and I have hated every single day of it. And I want you to know that." Casimir looked at her across the kitchen. "Lock the door behind me," he said. Lorimer Voss kept bees. That was the thing nobody ever believed. He had 6 hives on a patch of scrubby land behind his house, and on the mornings when he was not running the second-largest criminal organization on the coast, he could be found out there in a white cotton suit with a smoker in his hand, moving among the boxes with a slowness that had nothing to do with age. Casimir walked across the wet grass at 7:20 and stopped 10 feet away. Lorimer did not turn around. "You have not been out here since you were a boy," the old man said. "You used to be terrified of them." And I would say, "Casimir, they only sting you if you make it clear you are afraid." And you would say, "Lorimer, that is the stupidest thing anybody has ever said to me. It is still the stupidest thing anybody has ever said to me." Lorimer laughed. He put down the smoker and took the veil off his head and turned around, and his face was old and kind and creased and enormously, genuinely pleased to see him. "Well," he said, "you made a spectacle of yourself last night." 200 people, Casimir, in Ambrose Lockhart's house. On a truce night, he shook his head, ruefully, fondly. "Did you at least enjoy it?" Casimir took his right hand out of his pocket. He did not raise it. He simply took it out, and Lorimer Voss saw what was in it, and everything in the old man's face went perfectly still, and the morning was very cold and very quiet, and behind him the bees went on with their work. "Ah," Lorimer said. 9 bills of lading, Casimir said, signed by a clerk called Ansel Croft in Ambrose Lockhart's freight documentation office. 11% overcarriage on 6 empty containers, moving nowhere, 14 months, a little over $2 million, routed to a holding company in the Falco name. Saturday night. The signing room. Lorimer Voss put the veil down carefully on the top of a hive, and then he did the thing Marin had told him he would do, And Casimir felt the floor of his own chest go out from under him, because she had been right about all of it, and he had let himself hope, on the drive here, that she had been wrong about this one part. "They came to me," Lorimer said quietly. "The Falcos, a year ago, they said, if the alliance does not happen, we go back to the water, and it does not stop until one of the two names is gone." He spread his hands. "And I looked at that boy I raised, going to sign a treaty with a family that has never kept one, and I thought, they are going to kill him anyway. In a year, in 2, they will do it at a wedding, and I will be too old to stop it. So you agreed to do it first. I agreed to control it." His voice did not rise. It never had. There was going to be one death, Casimir, or there was going to be 400. That is the arithmetic. I have not slept in a year. But there was only ever one number at the bottom of that column, and I have spent my entire life being the man who is willing to look at the number. He took a step forward. "You know I love you," he said. "You know that." "Yes," Casimir said, "I know that." And that was the terrible part. And they both understood it, and the bees hummed on in the gray light. "Do not do this," Lorimer said. "Come inside. Let me make you a coffee, and let us go through it together, the way we have gone through every single thing that has ever happened to you, and I will show you on paper that there is no other road." Casimir stood in the wet grass. He wanted to. That was the truth of it, and he would carry it for the rest of his life. He wanted to put the gun away and sit down in the warm kitchen with the man who had carried his father's coffin and be told what to do. He thought about a woman on a staircase at 4 in the morning saying please. $2 million, Casimir said. It was never about the money. No, it was not. And that is the only reason I am still standing here. Casimir's voice did not change. "But you took it anyway, Lorimer. You could have refused it. It would have made no difference to the arithmetic. Your one death and your 400 would have come out exactly the same. And you took $2 million anyway, because a man cannot bear to be righteous and poor at the same time." The old man's mouth opened. "There was a girl," Casimir said, "who used to say something to a man she loved. She said, 'Do not take money you have not earned, because you will spend the rest of your life pretending you did.'" Lorimer Voss stared at him. "She said it to a boy who took it anyway," Casimir said. "And that boy stood in a ballroom last night and laughed at her for it. And now, I am standing in a field, and I am looking at the second man who took it, and I am watching him pretend." "Casimir," Lorimer whispered. "Who is she?" "She is my bookkeeper," Casimir said. "She found the 11%. And he raised the gun and shot Lorimer Voss twice, and the bees came up out of the hives in a great furious cloud, and the old man went down into the wet grass on his back with his eyes open and the white suit going dark, and Casimir stood there and let them boil around him and did not move. He did not go home. At 8:30 in the morning, he walked into the freight documentation office of the Lockhart line, past 2 security men who looked at his face and made a decision, and into a room of 40 desks where 40 people looked up at once. Ansel Croft was at the 4th desk from the window. He had the beginnings of a black eye, which meant somebody in that ballroom last night had already worked out what he was worth. "You," Ansel said. And then, with an appalling gathering of courage, "You cannot come in here." Casimir walked past him, to the glass door at the end, and opened it without knocking, and Ambrose Lockhart looked up with the expression of a man who has been expecting a call and has instead received a visit. Casimir put the envelope down on the desk. 9 of your bills of lading, signed by your clerk, moving Falco money against Vasari Freight, on your paper, in your name, for 14 months. If I had wanted a war with you, Ambrose, I would have taken these to a federal prosecutor and not to your office. And then, understand that your daughter is engaged to a man who has been selling your name for about $8,000 a month, and that stupidity in a freight office is a thing you can survive, but stupidity in your family is not." Ambrose Lockhart's hand had gone very slowly onto the envelope, and Ambrose, that woman. Last night, in your ballroom, in front of 200 people, your future son-in-law stood her in the middle of the floor and made a joke out of her life. Casimir opened the door. He is not staff, and he is not family. So I am going to leave him to you. He walked back out through the 40 desks. He did not look at Ansel Croft, who had stood up and was saying his name, and went on saying it in a voice that got higher and thinner all the way down the stairs. The door of the house on Vance Hill was bolted. Doximir stood on the step in the pale, wet morning and knocked, and the house was silent, and for 4 full seconds he was more afraid than he had been at any point in 12 years. Then a chair scraped, and the bolt went back. Marin opened the door in the grey coat with the pistol hanging from her right hand, held down along her leg, her finger flat outside the trigger, exactly as he had told her. And her arm was shaking with the weight of it, and she had clearly been standing in that hallway holding it a very long time. She looked at his face. She did not ask. She stepped back to let him in, and put the pistol on the hall table, and then her legs went, and Casimir caught her. And they ended up on the floor of the hallway with their backs to the wall, side by side, like 2 people waiting for a bus. He did not say, "It is done." She did not ask if it was. After a long time, she said, "Did he try to talk to you?" "Yes." "Did it work almost?" Casimir said. Marin put her head back against the wall and shut her eyes, and a tear went down the side of her face into her hair, and she made no attempt to deal with it. "He was kind to me once. Lorimer 4 years ago. I had made a mistake, a real one, and I was waiting outside your office to tell you, and he sat down next to me and told me that in this business the ones who confess fast die old." She swallowed. "I have thought about that every day for 14 months, Marin. I know." Her eyes stayed shut. I know. Ambrose Lockhart called at 10 o'clock. Casimir took it at the window of the front room with a cup of black coffee, watching Emeric walk the wall. "The engagement is over," Ambrose said. There was nothing in his voice at all. "My daughter is upstairs, and she is not taking it well, and she will take it a great deal worse in about a year when she understands what I have saved her from. The clerk has resigned, and he will not be employed again on this coast in anything that requires a man to be trusted with a number. He wept in my office, Casimir. He wept, and he told me it was 8,000 a month. I said 8,000. You did. You were very precise about a number. For a man who came here to threaten me, I did not come to threaten you," Casimir said. "I came to give you your house back." Silence on the line. "There will be talk about your bookkeeper," Ambrose said at last. And his voice had changed, and it took Casimir a moment to recognize what it had changed into. 200 people, Vasari. Half of them are saying you have lost your mind, and the other half are saying she has been running you for 6 years. Let them. You have not heard the third thing. A dry breath. The third thing they are saying is that Casimir Vasari, who has never in his life put his hand on anything he did not first own, stood in the middle of my ballroom and asked a woman's forgiveness before he touched her. "Forgive me," you said. 200 people heard it. My own wife heard it, and she has not stopped talking about it since, and she has not spoken about anything I have done in 20 years. Casimir said nothing. "Do not call me again this month," Ambrose Lockhart said, "and I will not move a container against you for the rest of the year, and after that we will see." The line went dead. She came downstairs at noon. Dr. Pell had strapped the ribs and put 4 hours of fluid into her arm and left her sleeping, and she came down slowly, one hand on the wall, wearing one of Casimir's shirts because her own had been ruined, and stood in the doorway of the kitchen and looked at the table. He had put the envelope on it. He had not opened it. "You did not look," she said. "It is yours. It is your empire. It is your 14 months. Marin sat down. She slid out the 9 sheets, squared them, and then she reached back into the envelope and took out one more piece of paper folded in 4 that Casimir had not known was there. "I was going to give you this," she said, "on the day it was over, whichever way it went." Casimir unfolded it. It was a ledger page. Her handwriting, which he had seen 10,000 times, small and upright and perfectly even, ruled into columns, dated 14 months ago, running to the previous week. He knew all of them. Every man on that list worked for him. Dolan on the North Gate, Pitar in the shell accounts, Emmerich's cousin, 19 names, and against each a date, and against each date a figure, and at the bottom a total. $186,000. Casimir looked at it for a long time. Lorimer was buying them, Marin said. One at a time. He never offered a man money, he offered a man a reason, and the money came second and felt like an afterthought, and that is how you buy a loyal man without him ever noticing he has been sold. Her voice was completely level. I could not tell you. If I had told you 14 months ago, you would have gone to him, and you would have had nothing, and he would have talked you out of it, and then he would have known I was looking. And then I would have died in a stairwell and you would have died in a signing room. So you outbid him, Casimir said. So I outbid him. She looked at the table. Not with money, not really. Money was just the part that could be written down. A man being courted by a very great old man needs somebody to sit with him at 3 in the morning and remind him what he is. And that costs time, and I did not have any time. So I bought it. From myself. Every hour, I was not working. I was drinking bad coffee in bad rooms with frightened men, telling them that you were worth it. Casimir did not put the paper down. The ribs, he said. Marin went very still. I fell, she said. On the stairs at Corley Street, 4 nights ago, coming up with the last of the ledgers, at about 3 in the morning. She turned her hands over and looked at the palms of them. I had not eaten since the Tuesday. There was no money left. I had spent all of it on the men on that page. And I stood up at the bottom of that staircase, and the whole world went white. And when I came back, I was lying across the 4th step in the dark, with the pages all around me. Casimir did not speak. I picked them up, Marin said. All of them. It took me an hour because I could not bend. She said it, the way she said everything flatly, as a figure. And then I went up and I sat in the chair, and I finished the column, because it was the last one. 10 days ago, Casimir said. I stood in your office and asked you if you were unwell. Yes, and you said you were tired. I was tired, Marin said. Casimir put the paper down. $186,000, he said. 186,412, Marin said. The 12 was a taxi. You earn $240 a year. His voice was very slow. After the government takes its share in 14 months, you saw, perhaps, 170. Marin did not look up. So where did the rest of it come from? He said. She was quiet for a moment. I had savings. I do not spend money, Casimir. I never have. 6 years of not spending money is a great deal of money. She turned her hands over and looked at the palms of them. And I sold my mother's ring, which I had been keeping for no reason, because there was nobody to give it to. And I stopped paying rent on a flat with a bed in it and took a room with a chair in it instead. And the difference between those two things, over 14 months, is about $7,000, which is exactly what it cost me to keep Dolan on the North Gate. She said it the way she said everything, flatly as a figure, and when it ran out, Casimir said. And when it ran out, Marin agreed. I put on a uniform and I carried a tray for $11 an hour, in a house full of people who want you dead, and I let a man I used to love make a joke of me in front of 200 witnesses, because I needed 6 more days. The kitchen was very quiet, and you did not ask me, Casimir said. No. Why? And Marin Ostro, who had never in 6 years failed to have an answer, sat with her hands flat on the wood and looked at them. Because if I had asked you, she said, you would have given it to me, immediately, without asking why, and then I would have known what I was to you. Her voice went to almost nothing. And then I would have had to do something about it. And I have been very carefully not doing anything about it for 4 years, because I am a bookkeeper from Corley Street, and you are what you are. And the day I let myself want something from you is the day I stop being the one person in your life who never wanted anything, and that was the only thing I had. Casimir got up. He came around the table and crouched beside her chair, looking up at her, which he had not done for another human being since he was a child, and he took her hands and turned them over and held them. They were shaking. "Look at that," Casimir said quietly. Marin looked down at her own hands, shaking in his. 6 years I sat across a desk from you and watched your hands not move, and I told myself it meant you were calm. He shook his head slowly. "You are holding on, Casimir. You are not going back to Corley Street. The room is finished. Your things are already in a car. And there is a chair by the window in that room." Marin, with a blanket folded on the arm of it, and Merrick stood in my kitchen at 3 o'clock this morning, with his hat in his hands, and could not tell me about it, and I want you to understand that I will be seeing that chair for the rest of my life. She had gone very white. He was not supposed to go there. She said no. He was supposed to go there. I sent him. Casimir's hands tightened on hers. "The money goes back into your account this afternoon. All of it, with 14 months of interest, that I have calculated generously, because I am not an accountant, and you will correct me, and I will enjoy it. And nobody in this city is ever going to call you the help again, because the last man who did it is finished, and the woman who did it will not be at my table on Saturday. And there is no Saturday. You cannot just decide my life. I have just done it. That is not an argument." "No," Casimir agreed. "It is a confession." She stared at him. "You will sit where I sit," he said. "You will hold the number, and you will tell me when I am wrong. And you will be wrong sometimes, and I will still be here. You do not have to be the one who never asks for anything. And if I ask for something, ask." Marin Ostra looked at him for a very long moment, and then she took one hand out of his and lifted it and put it flat against his chest, over his heart, and held it there. She had never touched him first. Not once. Not in 6 years. "I would like," she said unsteadily, "to be extremely bad at my job for about a week. Yes, I am going to sleep for approximately 4 days. In a bed. Yes. And then I would like to see the ring," Marin said. Casimir blinked. "The Falco ring. The one Renata told you to sell. 4 carats, was it? Because I have seen the market this quarter, and I want you to know, Casimir, that you paid about a 40% premium for 2% more light, and if you had brought me with you I would have got you the same stone for 110. And I would have made the man apologize while he wrapped it." Casimir Vasari stared at her, and then he laughed. It came out of him rough and cracked and entirely unguarded, the laugh of a man who has not laughed properly in a great many years, and he put his forehead down on their joined hands, and his shoulders shook, and Marin sat there with her palm against his chest. "You were always costing things," he said into the wood. "Somebody has to." He lifted his head. He looked at her, at the gray coat over the back of the chair, and the 6 years, and the cracked ribs, and the 4th step in the dark, and the $11 an hour, and the $186,412. "Marin," he said, "forgive me," and she leaned forward. In a small gray house on a hill, in the middle of the day, with nobody watching at all, and kissed him. He kept the ledger page. He had it framed, which she found ridiculous, and hung it in the room where he did business, and men would come in and see 19 names in small upright handwriting and a total at the bottom, and they would ask him what it was, and Casimir would look at the woman sitting on his left with her hands moving over the papers and say the same thing every time. "That is the price of me," he would say. She paid it. Ask her what I was worth. 200 people watched a man cross a ballroom that night, and every one of them thought they were watching him claim her. They were watching him apologize. If this one got you, tell me in the comments, which moment did it? The tray, the staircase, or the chair by the window? Give it a like if you want more stories about the quiet ones who were holding everything together the whole time. and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. There is another story waiting for you on the screen right now.